Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So we're on the final part of the day. So I'm going to cover off inclusion diversity, share with you some of the stuff we've done kind of over the last 3 years. I would say the end of last year, it kind of all came to fruition. We've been on quite a significant journey around kind of the whole inclusion diversity space. So kind of what's standing between me and the end of the day is some beers and some sunshine. So I'll try and kind of run through things fairly quickly and not repeat some of the messages which have been shared over the course of today itself. First of all, just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you in terms of having me here today to talk about, the journey we've been on. And I'm really hoping that I can get to share, some of the key learns and also, setting some of that best practice as to what we, do around diversity and inclusion itself. I know it's, a real hot potato. Everybody's talking about inclusion diversity. People are thinking about, different mechanisms, different strategies to adopt, especially within the kind of the recruitment sense as well. So, whilst I'll be talking about inclusion diversity within emerging talent, I appreciate not everybody works within the early careers emerging talent space. What I'll try and do is just share, some of the broader lessons and how we can apply that to, other parts of recruitment. So whether you're recruiting for, volume roles or recruiting for, specialist experienced hire roles as well. So, moving on. So I'm not going to spend much time talking about, who Lloyds Banking Group are, because I'm sure you'll all be aware of, the Lloyds brand itself. The key messages I really wanted to emphasise here are, when you say the word Lloyds, people tend to kind of associate it with, a branch, or they tend to associate it with, they'll be looking for a banker, or I need to be great at maths, or I, needed to have studied finance to actually work, in that particular organisation. So we operate, under a number of different brands. We recruit for various kind of career paths. So whether that's from, relationship management through to financial management, through to technology, through to products and marketing. We recruit for, a number of different areas which people don't necessarily consider when they interact with, our brand itself. So we are the UK's largest retail and commercial bank itself. We're going through quite a lot of change at the moment. So we're going through a big transformation phase in the sense of, becoming a more digital bank. Just bearing in mind, the digital kind of disruption and digital age that kind of we're living within as well. Okay, so first of all, I just wanted to kind of set the context and the kind of the case for why we want to focus on inclusion diversity itself. So, you'll all be aware that, nothing remains static. We're living in a changing world. So, you'll be aware of things like, digital disruption, the rise of, robotics, artificial intelligence. You'll be aware of, factors like, living in a local, global world. And all of those elements, have an impact on, both you and I in the sense of how we live and also how we work as well. So actually, as organisations, we have to be, reflective of changing the way in which, we do things within that organisation. As part of that, it's really important that actually organisations are changing in the sense of, the demographics of the individuals who work within those organisations. Okay, so again, just to kind of set the context itself, so, I'd probably say I'm really lucky to work for an organisation who takes inclusion diversity so seriously. So we have support from all of our senior board who, individually sponsor one of the demographics. You guys may be aware of, some of the public commitments we've made. 3 years ago, we made a public commitment around increasing the number of women in senior positions, and we set quite a bold target to reach 40% by 2018. Now, we've narrowed that gap, so we started at 29% back in 2014, and at the end of last year, we reported 34% of women in senior management positions, which, in the context of banking, is a positive picture to ensure that actually our workforce is representative of, the UK population itself. More recently, this year, you guys may have seen some coverage around focus from a Black and ethnic minority perspective. So we're the first FTSE 100 organisation to make a public commitment around increasing representation of Black and ethnic minority individuals in senior positions. So at the moment, our current proportion is 5.6%, and we're looking to increase that to 8% by 2020 itself. So if we look at our customer base, so 10% of our customers, whether they're retail customers, they're corporate customers, they're institutions, are Black and ethnic minority. So actually, as an organisation, it's hugely important that our workforce truly reflects the demographic of the UK itself. And we also focus on other areas of inclusion and diversity, like disability. We also focus on LGBT, and also there's a very large focus on social mobility itself as well. So hopefully what I'll be able to do today is just kind of share with you some of the things we've done in terms of our journey and what that's meant, in terms of the recruitment process. So at the moment, yes, what we see is if you look at each of your demographics, and you have a look at the representation of that across your different levels of the organisation, it starts quite nicely when you're talking about junior positions, but actually, as those positions increase, the representation becomes less and less and less. So, there's quite bold commitments, bold targets in terms of how we increase that representation to ensure that we are truly reflective of, our customer base, but also the UK population and our workforce as well. Now, why is there a big focus, from an emerging talent perspective? So within early careers, emerging talent, what you're essentially doing is you're predicting the future. So you're having a look at actually what are your workforce requirements, 4 or 5 years down the line. Actually, a decision you're making today, you're talking about T-minus 3 or 4 years as to how that strategy then evolves and then gets delivered and comes to fruition 4 or 5 years down the line. But actually, if you're talking about it, from a succession gap, increasing, the representation across those areas, it kind of starts from now, because these individuals are going to go onto an accelerated learning program, they'll roll off into a managerial position, and they'll, continue to, through internal mobility, secure roles where that underrepresentation exists itself. Okay, so I'm going to touch on some of the broader learnings. I'm going to focus on 3 of our programs. I'm not going to talk about all of our programs today. So first of all, I'm going to talk about graduates, interns, and then I'll move on to talk about our scholars program. From a graduates and interns perspective, I'm primarily going to focus on gender. I'm going to focus on Black and ethnic minorities as well. And then from a scholars perspective, I'm going to focus on social mobility, because there's a lot of discussion as to how do we measure social mobility. So I'll just talk to you a bit about a model we've implemented and has worked quite well, and just share some of that best practice itself. So from a graduates and interns perspective, so we recruit for 14 different areas of the organisation. Each year we probably take on about between 400 to 500 across those 2 schemes. And these individuals essentially rotate around different jobs over a 2 or 2.5 year period over the course of the programme itself. And we recruit for various different job families or career paths that they would go into. Okay, so I think I've touched on some of the key things already, but what did this mean in terms of our recruitment strategy? So actually, how are we translating the commercial rationale, the commercial reasoning for why we're focusing on inclusion diversity, and what does that mean from a recruitment perspective and how we're going to market? So I'll just kind of touch on a few of these areas. I mentioned that it's so important that we've got the right representation which reflects our customer base. Now, both you and I, are completely different, and we're completely different in the sense that we're unique individuals. We all have our own, story to tell in the sense of, what we've been exposed to, and the experiences that we've lived, and that shapes us individually as a unique individual. So actually, as an organisation, why would you want to recruit a mini-me? Because actually, to make any organisation successful, you need different people who have very different backgrounds and very different ideas to almost bring that into a melting pot and have that synergy itself. So playing a role in how can Britain prosper? So I think what we're all guilty of is buying talent. So, we say, right, this is our immediate need, and we need to go to market, and we need to recruit this person to get a bum on a seat and to do a job very, very quickly. But actually, what about all the candidates who you've engaged through your brand? What about, our commitment to the UK economy in terms of how we're supporting employability? So I think, every single one of us in this room has that, that commitment in terms of how we supporting candidates who don't get through the process. So actually, we give them feedback, they can work on those things, and yes, they may not have been successful for our brand, for our organisation, but actually they may go and get a role elsewhere. So those are one of the things that we really wanted to focus on in terms of how we give back to candidates. Another one of the things that we really wanted to focus on was actually dispelling some myths around our sector. And I think regardless of what sector you guys come from, think about when you go to a dinner party or you meet somebody for the first time. I don't know why it's the case in the UK. I actually lived in Guatemala for a little while, and when you met people would never ask you what you would do. And I only really ever noticed that when I came back to the UK. You meet somebody and somebody automatically says to you, "Oh, so what do you do?" And you tell them what they do, and they automatically have an assumption as to what that industry means. Now, when a candidate engages with your brand, your organisation, again, they will have their own assumptions about what your organisation does. So it's so pivotal, so critical that actually we can articulate our proposition in a very clear and easy way for our candidate base. And the reason I'm saying that is you may be, restricting candidates who may not necessarily engage with you. And especially from an inclusion diversity perspective, actually there may be pools of candidates who, if you can articulate the proposition in the right way, may be engaged and may actually want to do a job in your organisation. Creating that accessible and desirable career route as well. So, thinking about, women in technology, say, for instance. So 17% of women work in technology. Actually, what are we doing in terms of creating the right role models to make it, an accessible career route for those individuals? And what are the message levers that we're thinking about? helping candidates identify the right career path, so especially from an early careers perspective. And also, I would say the world of work is changing. So for those who have children in this room, your children will be doing jobs, or 70% of jobs, which don't actually exist yet, or we don't actually know about. So, helping candidates, that transferability is going to become so much more important, especially as we kind of move through over the coming years, and thinking about that transferability itself. And then also creating a fair and positive candidate experience regardless of background. So actually, we may get it right in terms of, selling the right proposition in the right way. But if you've got a process which is absolutely riddled with adverse impact and unconscious bias, what's the point, Because actually what you risk is disengaging a huge proportion of individuals. And if your process is set up where it filters out, more females than their male counterparts, actually what's the impact in terms of, that messaging in terms of, who they potentially will talk to as to the process they've been through. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of, our fundamentals as to the recruitment process itself? So what we wanted to do was shift from purely recruiting on past performance to recruiting based on strengths. So strengths has enabled us to focus more on potential. Now, if you're thinking about it from an early careers perspective or in the perspective of the changing world of work, it becomes so much more important to think about, actually, has this individual got the right core ingredients in terms of motivation, desire, cultural fit, but are they demonstrating, the right potential in that they could be molded for the specific role kind of that we're recruiting for? And what that really enables is that enables a great equalizer, and it enables that process that candidates can go through without unconscious bias, adverse impact. So it's just thinking about that itself. So diversity being the core of the strategy. So we deliberately kind of set that out within our recruitment process to say, we want to recruit people who will feed into managerial grades, and we want to increase our representation from a diversity perspective. I talked about potential versus performance and also prospering talent. So what we wanted to think about was actually how are we supporting candidates, through that end-to-end process. So for 3 of our programs, we receive annually about 40,000 applications. Now, every candidate will get a feedback report at the initial stage of the application, and if they make it through to an assessment centre, they'll also get a feedback report, and that's regardless of whether you're successful or not. And the reason we've done that is not only the role we play within the UK economy around employability, but also from a very commercial perspective, in that we need to get out of the mindset of thinking of candidates as just purely candidates, because actually a candidate may be a customer of your organisation, or there may be a future customer. And when we're talking about it from an early careers perspective, actually that's a customer in the context of Lloyds Banking Group, somebody who's got financial needs requirements for a whole lifetime. So actually, if you give them a really bad, process, you're, potentially disengaging some of that commercial value you're going to get from that individual. Okay, I'll just kind of touch on some of the stuff we've done from, an attraction perspective. So one of the things we've done is we've showcased and role modelled some of the individuals for them to actually tell their story. So through various focus groups we've done across different demographics, actually one of the things which has consistently come out is the lack of role models So we know across black and ethnic minority candidates, candidates who have a disability, women, when they're applying for a role, generally will have a lower level of confidence in relation to their counterparts. So what are we doing in terms of, some of the messaging, and how are we role modelling and increasing the confidence through that process? We've done work with various societies, external forums, to target specific populations in how we make it an attractive proposition. Educational requirements. So, what I would say is we tend to use educational requirements because we've always used them. So actually challenge and question, is it absolutely critical, is it absolutely crucial that we need those particular degrees for, whatever job that they're actually applying for? Now, there's a lot of research which has been done to demonstrate that actually there's very little correlation between educational performance and how you actually perform in the workplace. So there's a lot of research done by EY, by Goldman Sachs. Lloyds Banking Group has also been involved in that research to have a look at the correlation between getting a first and somebody who gets, a 2-2, and how they then go on to perform in the workplace. That's with the exception of, if you're going to a very specific career like medicine or architecture, where you need to have that grounding in terms of doing that well. Targeting specific universities, so we did a lot of analysis in the sense of which universities are rich for black and ethnic minority females, let's say. So we target Birmingham, Aston, Leicester. So we target universities which are not part of your traditional Russell Group universities. And what that's enabled for us is to get a richness of candidate across your different demographics. And then being open to all degree disciplines. So we recruit any degree discipline, any background, a minimum of a 2-2. And what that's enabled us to do is have a much wider audience that we're targeting, because we all know that the market is saturated from a Russell Group university perspective, because everybody targets them. So just think about other universities themselves. Okay, so some of the work we've done, there's been a lot of conversation about a website being really, really important. Actually, that's probably the first interaction an individual's going to have with your brand, potentially. So actually, how is that website being built? Is it engaging for those demographics that you're trying to target? So it's just thinking about, who's featured, what does that website potentially give that individual so they actually go on to apply. Now, one of the things which I'm not going to repeat any of the messages today, but one of the things which has really worked with us, so we work with Path Motion. So what Path Motion is it's a framework which enables candidates to actually talk to people in the business. So they can go on, type a question, and somebody in the business will actually respond to that individual. And often what we find is there's often dialogue happening between candidates. So we've had instances where candidates have, a particular type of disability. They actually just want to speak with somebody in the organisation to get an understanding of what it's like to work for that organisation. And that's actually helped in terms of that candidate then having the confidence to go and complete that. I talked about, showcasing individuals. I'm just going to show a very quick video. So we've done quite a lot of work on our website in terms of showcasing individuals. I'm just going to show you an example of that.
So I suppose the thing I was looking most for my employer was flexibility. And all of a sudden, this became even more important to me when I discovered I was pregnant. At the time, I was really shocked and really nervous about the whole thing, because I just started the program and I've just kind of got to know the team, and I didn't know how people would feel about it. And I assumed they wouldn't want to invest in my development when they knew I was going to become a mum. But I was totally wrong. They were great, really supportive, and we were able to work out a flexible plan for balancing my life as a mother as well as my life as a trainee HR manager. I've learned that it pays to ask questions, because it's only by knowing the answers that I can be clear about what the deliverables are and plan my workload. And so working collaboratively is something that Lloyds is really kind of proud of and really wants to kind of encourage. My boss, he's been great, he's been really supportive, giving me exposure to lots of interesting pieces of work. And then also other team members, everyone's really willing to help you and go out the way to kind of make sure you're developing. I can't tell you how much it means to me that Lloyds Banking Group supports my circumstances. I love the programme, I really enjoy spending time with my kids, so it's brilliant that I can do all of these things and enjoy all three.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think that's just showcasing some of the key messages that we want to try and get across and articulate to particular individuals. Okay, assessment selection. So I'm just going to whiz through this. So what have we done from an assessment selection perspective? So we introduced strengths-based methodology. Now, one of the challenges we had was the business not being very comfortable moving to a model where we're focused on recruiting potential versus past performance. One of the things which has really helped us is getting the business involved in the success profiling. So we've actually got the business involved in the sense of actually what's important in terms of success criteria, and that's really helped us in terms of getting their buy-in to that process itself. We found through analysis that some of our cognitive-based tests were having an adverse impact. So we actually moved to time recorded versus time limited tests, and that actually had a really good, it basically stopped that issue from happening. So we work with the likes of CAP in terms of developing those tests. We're using virtual reality, so we use virtual reality as an assessment tool at Assessment Centre. We actually found through our group exercise through doing analysis that candidates from a black and ethnic minority background were being impacted because of cultural norms through the group exercise and not wanting to challenge. What we actually did was we used virtual reality to assess the same strength but in a much safer environment, so that helped us in terms of making that decision at the wash-up. And then it's also about getting some of the basics right. So, if you're targeting candidates who, with a particular disability focus, actually, how's your process set up? Is your process fit for purpose in the sense of, ensuring that they don't get frustrated and then just fall out of that process itself? And then reporting. I think reporting is absolutely crucial. So, do you have an infrastructure in place which will allow you to do that insight and assess very real time as to whether there is an issue along, within your assessment process, or whether those candidates are actually falling out? Okay, I think I've touched on, some of these challenges. Business engagement I've spoken about. I think candidate expectations. So, if you are changing your process, think about what are you doing to ensure that candidates know up front what to expect from your process. Okay, so just lastly, I'm just going to touch on the Lloyds Scholars Programme. So the Lloyds Scholars Programme, we're not actually recruiting people to join the organisation. It's a programme where we work with 9 universities across the UK. We recruit 135 individuals a year, and we sponsor them to go to university. So we provide them with a package of financial, non-financial support, and this is particularly targeted to individuals from low socioeconomic backgrounds. Now, in order for us to actually select those individuals, we have to put them through a form of assessment to understand their financial and social need. Now, I know there's a number of different measures which have been used. So free school meals is used as a fairly standard one, parental occupation, educational maintenance allowance, or the 16 to 19 bursary. So there's lots of different kind of ways, but one of the things that we did last year, and we've seen a 22% increase with candidates with 2 social mobility indicators or more, is by using this framework. So there's 4 measures, in addition to the combined household income of £25,000. So we asked for a candidate's home postcode, so we used something called Acorn data, and basically what that enables us to assess is the level of deprivation that individual's living within. They've attended an unselective state school, first gen to university, which are fairly standard industry measures, and then also school performance at GCSE. So there is DFE data about school performance at the age of 16 when candidates complete their GCSE, and which schools are underperforming versus the national average. Okay, and then just lastly, so what was the end result? So, through doing the various bits that we've done in terms of branding, attraction, assessment, selection, essentially what the end result was, so from a gender perspective, so we're 8% ahead of the industry norm of 38.8% hires. So 3 years ago, we were 40%, and we've increased our position to 46% across our graduate and intern hires. From a black and ethnic minority perspective, there's been a 16% uplift from 17% to 33%. And then from a social mobility perspective, there's been a 22% increase, so 82% of individuals from a social mobility background. And then we were lucky enough to win the Diversity and Inclusion Strategy Award last year from the Association of Graduate Creators, or ISE as they're known now. Okay, so back to you, I think. Thank you for your time, guys.